Warren Buffett meetups on how to build a business that Warren Buffett would want to buy. Question. Anybody here would want to sell their business to Warren Buffett overnight for $1 billion? Well, the truth is not overnight. You give him 2 weeks to get his money together. But does anybody want to sell it? Or even wait 6 months to sell it? So nobody wants to sell it? Okay, listen. So let me tell you what Warren Buffett has to say about it. The call that you're not getting is coming from me. And I'll explain what that means. The call that you're not getting is coming from me. Before I start, I just want to say that one of the reasons why I wanted to do this meetup is because I deal with other people in town, and most people do not have a business background. They get into business, and Baruch Hashem, some are matzliach, some aren't, some are more matzliach than others, but essentially they don't have any guidelines. And I find that often down the line, issues come up that they don't know how to deal with because they don't have really any fundamental policy or principle what to. Financial approach I'll tell you very briefly in the short. I'm not a financial advisor, but I'll just tell you he's a very strong believer in the S&P index, very strong believer. He's very much against hedge funds and all these type of arcane and calculations and what's going to go and where the market's going. He once did a bet where he bet against hedge funds over 10 years, the S&P over the hedge funds in 10 years, and the hedge funds that he bet against were hedge funds that bought stock in other hedge funds. So he was really dealing with about 20, 30, maybe 50 hedge funds he was betting against, and he was right, that at the end of 10 years, the S&P far outdid all of the hedge funds together. So he has his approach, he calls it value investing, and what he really looks for is a business, and a business that is productive and he believes will continue to be producing. The way he approaches it is when he buys a business, he wants to keep the management in place. He's buying management. And that's relevant to all of you here because you are the managers. And the first part of the discussion will be about how he understands and what he wants out of managers. He, however, is not a hands-on owner. He does not even speak to the managers. He will, what do you call it? He won't speak to them for a year unless they call him. He picks people that he believes in and he lets them operate. He has only two simple rules. The first rule is don't lose your shareholders' money. That's the first rule. The second rule is follow the first rule. Don't lose your shareholders' money. That's all he's concerned about, and he believes that you're going to do it, and I think it's very, very rare in the history of his ownership that he ever moved out a CEO of the company. So what does he look for? He looks for a number of things. The first one is integrity. He believes that you as a business owner, your character is really the character of the company. If you're somebody who doesn't have ethics and is not, I'll give you an example of something that's happening right now. Everybody talks about how so many retailers are closing down and they're blaming it on Amazon. The fact of the matter is, I've written about this, forget Amazon has nothing to do with it, online has nothing to do with it, that the reason they're closing down is, first of all, Amazon, the retail market is trillions, Amazon has at most 10% of it, the online market has 10% of it, there's plenty of room, and in fact, except for eBay and Amazon, all the retailers, the major retailers are much stronger on, and so on. The reason why these companies like Toys R Us are closing down, and others as well that you read about, they're bought up by private equity firms. And as soon as they bought up, the private equity firms sucked out every dollar they can by piling on loans and credit and so on, and giving every dollar that was loose that they could get out of the bank based on the stock value of that particular company. It ran and it worked as long as everything was sensible and there was no commotion in the market. The moment the market itself either went down or the economy went down or the buying went down, they couldn't meet the credit, they couldn't meet the payments, and they were forced to go into bankruptcy. So that lack of character where these people came into a company, took over, owned it, and had no consideration for literally, cumulatively, tens of thousands of people who are lower to middle income type of employees who really have no future, no place to go, and they were put out of work simply so they could grab that extra dollar. So the first thing he looks for is integrity. In fact, in a letter to his stockholders, so he says the following story. He says, there's a local team there, a local minor league team, and he's given the right to throw out the first pitch every year. And he says, and the reason why, I'll be honest, is because I own half the team. So he throws out the first pitch. He says, I only use my fastball. I never use my deceptive pitch. His fastball has been clocked at a blazing 5 miles an hour, and that's with the tailwind. He says, and I don't use my deceptive pitch, which is my curve, and the reason why is because in 1879, the president of Harvard writes that he found out that a Harvard pitcher was using a deceptive pitch, meaning a curve. They didn't even have a name for it yet. And he will never allow a Harvard pitcher to throw a deceptive pitch. So therefore, Warren Buffett never throws his deceptive curve, which I'm sure is not that deceptive. The point is that anything to do with deceptiveness, anything to do with lack of character, anything to do with lack of ethic, anything to do with lack of morality, will never get to first base with Warren Buffett. And there's an important lesson here, besides for the moral value system, the religious value system. What he's also saying is that you can't run a company effectively if that's the way you think, because you're always looking around corners and you're always looking for shortcuts rather than understanding the company itself and what the competition is. The second thing he looks for is judgment. How good are you in making judgments about the situation, about your company? Every business will have a situation where a judgment can make or break the company. It could be a competitor comes in, it could be a question about a new product. I mean, take a look at Kodak when they decided that they're pushing the film instead of digital, even though they owned the patent to digital film, to digital cameras. It's their patent. They leased it out, but they bet on the film, and they're no longer in business. So judgment makes a factor. I could give you two quick examples that I personally went through. When I was very young in the business, it was my second year, I was working on Wilkinson razor blades. And Wilkinson were up against Gillette. I wrote a campaign that David Krutzik, my creative director, said was the best campaign. And the account management supervisor, both of them said it was the best campaign ever that was done for Wilkinson. It made me feel good. We go to the president of the agency. The agency was Dustin McManus Macy's. Macy's was an English agency. It was a combined, the agencies are combined. So the president of the New York office was from England. So we go and we present the commercials, he look at it, and I'll never forget what he said. The words still ring in my ears. I will never allow humor in a Wilkinson commercial. Now, I wrote many humorous commercials. I won awards for humor. I will never allow humor in Wilkinson commercial. And the reason why is in English history and tradition, the Wilkinson sword was very famous. I'm sure you all heard of the charge of the Light Brigade, and Wilkinson's sword was there. It's just part of the, I call it second to the Queen. And therefore, it was not regal to put humor. Now, we looked at each other, I remember, and we're thinking, we're in America, this tradition has no meaning to us whatsoever. Humor is a big factor in American commercials. We're up against Gillette. This dialogue didn't have any place to go, but he had a final word. The final word being is we went to what we call pomp and circumstances, really fancy swords, clashing, and all that type of commercials. The net result is, at the end of the year, you couldn't find Wilkinson blades in America. So judgment was a factor, and his judgment was predicated on something that was totally not relevant to anything having to do with the American market. There's a cute ending to that story. So when we walked out of the meeting, I was huffing and puffing, and I was trying to, I wanted to show. So I said to the creator, I said to David, I said, you hired me for my creativity, and this is what happens? I don't want to work on the account. See, the tall guy looks down at me nonchalantly. He says, you know what that means, Charlie? I said, no. He says, it means you're quitting. I said, no, I take that back. It's okay, I'll work on the account. Then I was thinking to myself, we were on Madison Avenue, and literally right behind us on Park Avenue was Colgate, which is doing the distribution. I said, let's go to Colgate directly and present to them. Then I realized that truly would be the charge of the Light Brigade, and I forgot about that too. And one more side story, just bear with me. So in the future, at some point, we made another commercial. Gillette had come out with a Track 2, a two-blade razor. So we came out, we did a commercial showing a huckster, like, used car salesman with a flat jack and so on. I've got the 5-blade razor, he says. The first blade cuts it close, the second one closer still, the third one even closer. The fourth gets on the subconscious layer. The fifth one, I don't know what it's about, but it's good to have, right? We're poking fun at it. And then the guy says, all you need is Wilkinson shop. Okay, it did well. But last year, for some reason, I was curious something about Wilkinson, and I looked it up, and it turns out that they have a 5-blade razor. So, I guess we were way ahead of our times. Anyway, so judgment is a critical factor. The next factor by him is intelligence. Now, intelligence, oh, 1 second. So that's one case of judgment. I'll tell you another case of judgment. We were working on the Daihatsu car account. We were a single office, which is very rare for a car account, on the West Coast, and Daihatsu came to us, and we did some commercials for them. And then the head of the Daihatsu America asked us to do another commercial he wanted to present it to Japan. So I wrote some commercials, We go down to present to him. Now understand this, he was an American executive hired from an American car company, I forgot which one. In Detroit, car companies in America, actually in the agency business, are second to whatever, because the budgets are so big that every agency is desperate to have them as an account. It's very prestigious besides the money. And therefore they're treated like uber royalty. They get anybody who's at that high level is treated. We go into the meeting, we make the presentation. The representative from Japan was sitting there, remember, and he's sitting there at the table. And the head of our agency was a very, very smart guy. He says to me, it's a good commercial, all happy, but I don't think we should run the commercial. I don't think we should even produce a commercial. So he says, why not? He says, the truth is, we're not saying it's a clever commercial, but we don't have much to say right now. There's nothing new. You have a much smaller budget than your competition does. In 6 months from now, you're going to come out with a new engine. Then we could talk about something or something to say. Let's save the money for that. Now, first of all, understand that we were turning down our own money because we get money for the production, we make profit on that, and we get the media dollars. I never forget the way he looked at us, and he looked at the president. And I knew right then and there we were out of agency. Because he promised to Japan, he didn't want to sound stupid that he thought he's not going to deliver it. He hadn't thought it through whether or not we should in fact be making commercial right now, what the reason is. And we had a mild discussion, and a month later we were no longer the agency of record. So right off the bat we were giving up a couple of $1 million worth of income to the agency, but ethically and morally we felt it was not correct to make that commercial. The fact is, Daihatsu is not in the market. Now, I'm not going to say that is the reason, for sure not. But I think it's part of the thinking process that went on and the judgment process that went on that led to the demise of Daihatsu in America. Those are 3 things. The other thing that he wants is know your own strengths and your own weaknesses. Don't pretend to be what you're not. Don't pretend to know more than you do. A lot of people reach a high level of management and they feel they have all the answers, they've done it, they've solved everything, and anything that comes to them, they can't. Know what your strengths are, know what your edge is, and if it's beyond your edge, then go look to someone who can answer that edge. And it makes a tremendous difference. I compare this and think of it in a simple way to understand what he's trying to say. But, and there's one more point that I don't want to bring up before, and I've written about this last couple of weeks. How does he spend his day, he says? He thinks and he reads. He thinks and he reads. He thinks about the market, he thinks about companies, he reads up about them. It's very important to him that the management is always out there beyond their own business and seeing what's going on and assimilating ideas, assimilating knowledge, assimilating solutions that other people have used for their problems, so that he has a wide reservoir that he could draw from when situations develop and he needs how to handle on it. He's very demanding of that, and that's what he says he does, and he's known for that. That he knows inside out companies and he knows inside out the market, and he thinks about it all the time. Most of us tend to get locked into that very narrow frame of reference, our business, and we never look beyond that. And we lose a lot of the type of information that could help us solve our problems or figure out where to go and so on, because we really have no reservoir to draw from. The underlying premise, in terms of giving you a picture of what he's saying, is that any business owner is like the captain of a ship. You are the man in charge, and that ship is at sea. You have to know everything there is to know about that ship at a certain level. You have to know the crew. You have to know how the boilers work. You have to know about the supplies of the ship. You have to understand the sea, you have to understand direction. That doesn't mean you have to be authority on the boilers, but you have to know enough that when the boiler breaks down and there's a storm going on, exactly what are you going to do to get out of that crisis. You have to encompass the whole picture. Anything that you're missing, sooner or later will come back and it's going to hurt you. So think of yourself in that role over there, that everybody's turning towards you. The Titanic, just as a total aside, one of the reasons why it crashed is because Captain Smith, an hour before the Titanic took off, decided that one of his executive officers didn't have enough experience, and he took somebody else. He put him off the ship and he took something else. It happens to be that on the crow's nest, which is that very high part of the ship where they have a lookout, particularly in those days to watch out for icebergs, there was supposed to be a binoculars. There wasn't. And the reason why it wasn't, it always bothered me, how could it be that the most important part of the ship, there's no binoculars? It turns out that that executive officer was in charge of it. He had put it into his room, and he hadn't told anybody, and they never found it. And had he seen it, it would have helped. And if anybody wants to, after the meeting, I'll explain to you how Hashem made the whole Titanic. It took many steps for the Titanic to meet that iceberg. So think of yourself as a ship. Here is the underlying rule that sort of pulls it all together about this aspect of management. And the aspect is simply, and this is his statement, risk comes because you don't know. If you don't know, you're going to run into risk. You have to know everything, or as much as you can. Risk comes when you don't know. And a lot of people, as I said, get very caught up in the narrow frame of reference in their business, and they have no outside perspective whatsoever. A way to understand whether or not you know your business is, do you have a mission statement? Do you have a mission statement? Because the mission statement defines what you're about, what your purpose is, and what your long-range plan is. I want to read from here because I didn't want to make a mistake of it. The Benjamin Moore Paints is a company of his. I want to read you their mission statement. Produce the highest quality paints and finishes in the industry, and deliver them directly through our nationwide network of knowledgeable, customer-friendly, independent retail locations. So the highest quality paint delivered through their own independent. They don't sell through Home Depot, they don't sell through any other chain. Why are we the highest quality? What do you mean to say when you're going to, how do you achieve being the highest quality? How do you measure yourself against the competition? What's to prevent the competition from becoming the highest quality? What benefit is there to the customer, the fact that you sell it directly? What do you mean by customer friendly? That's what it means when you have a mission statement, that you understand the fundamentals of your business, that you know your business. If you don't understand the fundamentals of your business and you call yourself highest quality, and then meanwhile people putting it on and it's flaking off, you're not the highest quality. If you have no way to understand what does it take, how well do you know your business? How well do you know the chemicals that go into it? And again, I had a very interesting experience with this. Before we launched Home Depot, so we had Home Base. Home Base was a similar type of a company. And what we were going to do is we were going to brand the private label paint. Private label, particularly at that time, was considered much less quality than a brand, even though quite often it's the same with some modification. But by branding it, people thought it would be a higher quality paint and easier to sell. So I go down, and then I'm given responsibility for doing so. So I go down to the Home Base office, and I meet with the people who put together the paint. And it was quite fascinating. For 45 minutes, they told me everything about making a paint, and it was quite interesting. I remember that there's titanium in paint. You know, everything with titanium is a very expensive type of a metal. So there's a lot of interesting points there that I was taking notes on and so forth. Then at the end of the conversation, I turned to them and I started asking questions that a marketing guy would ask. So who are you making the paint for? Is it a one-coat paint? Is it made where families have children, and is it easy to clean if the kid smears it with crayons? Those type of questions were, I thought, basic questions. The answer, Dead, dead, dead silence. Not a word, not a peep. And I looked at them, they looked at me, I'll never forget that look, we were looking right at each other, and I said to myself, oh my gosh, they never thought about who they're making the paint for and what kind of paint they should be making for them. I was, it happened to be late in the evening, so we broke up. I was going to come back and continue the conversation. During that period, we ended up resigning them, and we took over Home Depot to launch Home Depot. Home base is not around anymore. In other words, it's possible for people to be running a business and not even understand the fundamentals or some aspect of the business that turns out to be so critical. So risk comes from not knowing, and you should inscribe, anybody who owns a business or wants to be in business should inscribe that in their mind and never forget that. The second part, after management, that Warren Buffett puts right on there is, of course, again, I just want to mention, he certainly looks into the stock and the stock value, but that's not relevant to this conversation, and if I told you, you'd have to shoot me because I wouldn't know what I'm talking about, so let's leave that. But what he holds from a marketing standpoint are two things. One is brand. He does appreciate a brand, but it's not for tonight's conversation, it's a whole separate conversation. I would say the number one thing that is important to him is what he calls a famous moat. A moat. Now what is a moat? A moat is what we in advertising call a unique selling proposition. Something that distinguishes you from your competitor. In my last meetups, that's what I spoke about, the USP, unique selling. How many people were here last time? Okay, because I want to repeat one or two stories here just to give the gentleman here a firmer understanding. Unique selling proposition is the reason that should choose you and why you're not a commodity. Because really, if everybody's the same, I could go to him, and him, why should I come to you? So the most famous story, because this is really where that expression came from, is back in the late 40s, early 50s, when a gentleman named Marcel Reeves, who was the head of an agency called Ted Bates, had a client who owned a candy company, and the client was scratching a candy is a candy is a candy. There's no difference between candies. Like he really felt it was a hopeless situation to market it. Along the course of the conversation, he said something, and Mr. Reeves stopped him and made him repeat it, and what he said ended up generating billions of dollars over the years in sales. And what he said was, it melts in your mouth, not in your hands, M&Ms. And he understood that for the mother, it melt in your mouth means that you're not smearing all over your shirt. The kid's not smearing over his polo shirt all the chocolate, and the kid meant a what do you call it, sugary coating outside and chocolate inside. So he was the one who coined the expression USP, which became part of the nomenclature and part of the basic strategy of all advertising until today. It's progressed into positioning, but really everything starts with what's your point of difference, and he stands by that very strongly. The other one is just a quick story. It's a very interesting story that had a associate, Bud Robbins, who was working on the Aeolian piano, which some of you heard of, but it's a notch above Steinways used by concert pianists. And he goes down to a factory because in advertising you have to know everything there is to know about the product. And they show him the piano, a new piano that just came off the floor, and it's on the floor, and he's going to the top, and he's tinkling with the keys, and he's looking at all the wires and everything, and then in his tie and suit, because in those days you actually wore a tie and a suit, he gets on his hands and knees, and he starts crawling around in the shellac, in the wood, on the floor to see what's behind it, what's under it, and along the back he sees a metal brace. And he asked them, what's the metal brace about? And they said, don't waste time, it's really not relevant to anything they don't want to talk about. He kept insisting, till finally said, in 50 years, wood warps. So what we do is we put a brace now, so then 50 years, when the wood would naturally warp, it won't, and therefore the sound will be just as impeccable then as it is today. So imagine the craftsmanship and the quality that after the manufacturer and the owner are both dead and the grandchildren are using it, they're still concerned to make sure it has the right sound. And what do you call it? When the Metropolitan Opera moved to the new location, the only thing they took along at that time was their only piano with that brace in the back over there. Mr. Robbins wrote an ad about the famous ad, and they couldn't keep the piano on the floor, even though it's a very expensive piano. That is a concept of USP, something unique that separates you from the competition. Does anybody here own Geico, have Geico insurance for the car? Okay. Probably a good reason why you have it is because it's less expensive. And he owns Geico, and he loves Geico. And the reason why he loves Geico is because it's a moat. And the moat is the fact that it's less expensive. But the reason why it's a moat, it's not because they lower prices. The company is brilliantly led in terms of efficiency. They know how to keep cutting costs and keeping the costs down such that they continually advertise, save 15% or more. So that is a company that keeps producing and I think the highest margins in the insurance industry in terms of automobiles. And off of that, he brought up another moat. He brought up the largest independent car dealership in America, which has 99 dealerships. Now, a dealership costs a lot of money, and the float on the dealership in terms of what you owe the manufacturer of the car is humongous. It's millions of dollars for every dealership. He was able to buy this one dealership at 99. So number one, nobody could really afford to do anything like that, and it doesn't exist anymore. If you want to get to 99, you have to buy 18 different dealerships across the country to get to that value, which is very difficult, if not impossible. Now, he has tremendous clout with the manufacturers because he's selling so many cars, he negotiates tremendous pricing. By negotiating tremendous pricing, he could offer better deals and sell more cars and continue to make more money. But that's not all. He also sells, and his people sell Geico, promote Geico insurance when they come in to buy a car. So he's got the money coming in from 6 different ways because he understands the fundamental values of a moat. Anybody here own a railroad? Nobody? Anybody here want to build a railroad? Nobody. He owns Burlington North Santa Fe. Burlington North Santa Fe has what you call the second largest railroad in America. It has 6,000 locomotives, 32,000 miles of track, and there's no competition. It owns 35% of the market in railroad freight, and railroads carry more freight than the truckers do, even though we see trucks that don't treat trains, but trains carry more freight than and he owns 35% of that, and he owns monopolies basically because of his tracks in many parts of America. So that's a classic example, a famous example of his moat concept. But there's more to his moat concept than just a moat, because I'm sure all of you are saying to yourself, that's all great. You got a benefit. But not every time does that benefit last. What happens if the competition comes in and they duplicate it? They find some way to do something like that. Maybe there's another candidate. What exactly are you doing? So I'll mention the story that I told last time that he believes in what's called a durable moat. Durable means is that you keep extending it, you keep looking for ways to keep building upon it and taking it to the next level, the next level, the next level. So we took over an airline account owned by Paul Allen of Microsoft. He started an airline on the West Coast. I have no idea why. He was up against a major competitor. When he came to us, he's $40 million in debt. We called it Mechula. He said he was about to have 1 foot in the grave. And the first thing we told him is no more seas. He was running very low fares from LA, let's say, to San Francisco. And we told him you can fill the plane, but you can't take off because you can't afford the gears. No more SARS. The next thing we told him is that take out seats. So he had a mild heart attack on that one, because seats is how they make money. So don't even take out seats. We sell tickets for seats. We told him we have a 40% load factor. So what would a person rather, you have 60% load factor, 40% of the plane is empty. Would a guy rather seat with his leg in his chest or have some more room? So he agreed, took out seats to make more leg room. We told him no more beer, pretzels in the face and $4 beers, and giving free wine and free cheese and all that. Again, another heart attack, but he finally gave in and so on and so forth. And every time the business kept growing and growing and growing. And then we did something absolutely marvelous. if you call American Airlines and say from, let's say, Newark to LA, you got to go on a 4 o'clock flight, and they tell you can't get on the flight, it's booked, we can put you on a 7 o'clock flight, and they say to you, well, and you say, well, I need to go at 4 o'clock, sorry, thank you, and you hang up. The truth is, they could check the reservation system because they're all connected and say, by the way, United has an open seat on a 4 o'clock flight. We'll be happy to book you. We'll just do the booking. You take care of all the credit card and everything with United, but we'll get you on the flight. They can do that, but of course they don't. And if anybody did that, they'd be fired in 2 minutes. We came along and we said, that's exactly what we did. Either if we can't put you on our flight, AirCal, if you remember, if we can't put you on our flight, then we'll put you on another airline. Now, usually because we were not yet fully booked, we knew for most times we could put you on our flight, but if we couldn't, it was even better, because imagine you go to the office the next day and say, my God, AirCal put us on PSA. People wouldn't stop talking about it. To make the long story short, in 3 years, he went from $40 million in debt. He was sold to American Airlines for about $250 million. And the other airline almost went out of business. I still remember the little article in the LA Times. The PSA, the other airline, told the people either take a cut in salary or we're going out of business. So then the only thing that saved them actually is because we bought up America and United bought them up to be competitive in the market over there. So that's what you do. You keep building and you keep extending. You don't sit and say, okay, I got a point of difference. You keep. So let's talk about his famous Benjamin Moore paints. Let me tell you about how they keep extending their USP, their moat, as they say it. Because I want to read it to you. Let me just see where I put it down. Okay. They have a commitment to, they have more than 100 chemists, chemical engineers, and so on. So they have a huge team of people continuously working on developing that highest quality paint. The paint is essentially chemical based, and at some point, as new chemicals come into the market, as new formulas come into the market, they're continuously evolving, and that's why they keep doing many breakthroughs in the market that others the competition can keep up with. As an example, they have paint that's met the standards and acknowledged in terms of being free for people who have allergies and asthma, which is an important thing, that they're able to use that paint. They have, they meet the 5 stringent standards to be considered an eco quality, a green quality type of a paint, which are very stringent standards. So this and many more benefits they keep applying in order to keep expanding the moat. They're not just sitting there and say, we have a nice situation, we make our own paint, as we said in the mission statement, but they go beyond that and they keep expanding on that. So if you have a business, you have to start off without any, you have to start off by creating your point. Don't start. I mean, I've had somebody come to me, 2 people, it was in the last week. One of them had a product that had no point of difference. And I kept saying to him, but what's to prevent anybody else from doing this? And he had no answer to it. Another person came to me, and they entered the market, but there's already 5 strong competitors in the market, 4 strong competitors, and they had no point of difference why people should choose them. So if you don't have a point of difference, you're a commodity. If you're a commodity, people have a choice. And you think, well, if I run an ad, first of all, ads are not miracles. Ads build a business, but if the fundamentals aren't there, they're not there. And finally, what I want to sum up just is what they say about Warren Buffett itself, because I think the 3 things they say about him, you should apply it to itself. Number 1, the language they use, he's mastered his emotions. As I said early on, he's very sensitive to the way people psychologically operate in a market or in a business. They get panicky, they react to panic, they react to changes in the market. Every market is going to have its cycles. Don't get lost in cycles, and don't look at over your shoulder what everybody's doing. He believes, on the contrary, you have to be a contrarian. When they're panicky, it's a great time for you to buy or to do what you should be doing, because they're all walking away from opportunities. When they're all solid, it's a time for you to pull back. So number one, to be very careful in business about letting, as I mentioned with Wilkinson and with Daihatsu, where people's emotion affected the judgment. He has an insatiable intellectual curiosity about everything. He knows businesses inside out. He studies them. He, like I told you before, if you ask him what he does all day, he reads and he thinks and he thinks and he reads. That's an important lesson. Most people miss that. Most people think that they have all the answers. They know everything there is to know about it. And whatever they know, you could expand upon 100 times. I will tell you that as much as I've over 20, 25 years of marketing experience, I have a whole room filled with marketing books. There's always something else that I could learn that it makes me serve my clients better. So anyway, as a business, is that ship's captain who has to, has to take that responsibility to seeing the much bigger picture than just sitting at his desk and signing checks and worrying about invoices. And the third thing is that he believes in long-term commitment. He's not in for the short run. He's not in for scalability. Anybody came to him and says to him that anybody came to him and says, I want to build this business and get out and sell, is going to miss a tremendous amount of opportunity, and most likely he's going to fail at what he's doing. There's always those companies that somebody buys up and everybody thinks they can do the same. But for everyone, it's like the gold rush. For everyone that is bought up, you don't know how many fail. And I'll add a phrase that I think that everybody, again, in business should inscribe in their mind. This phrase I really picked out of a history that I was reading, and I thought it was a perfect application for business. And the word is friction. And let me explain what I mean by that. There was how many people know that there was a World War I? So we all know there was a World War II, so there must have been a World War I. But I guarantee you, most of us, right? In the early 1900s, Germany knew already they're going to go to war with France. Why? Because they've been fighting them over time for the last 2 centuries, so they knew sooner or later the way the politics would go. So they made a plan. The plan was called the von Scheifelen plan after the person did it. And the plan was they're going to go through neutral, which is really breaking every law, Holland and Belgium. They're going to go in a circular motion, touching what they said, brushing against the coast of the Atlantic coast, and come up to Paris from behind. And they'll be able to conquer Paris in 6 weeks before the French could really get their army together to defend against them. That was the plan. The plan was perfected to the T. They had every map, every chart, every timetable, everything worked out, the troop movement. And it was as perfect as you get. They had 10 years to work on it and keep refining it. But as the historian said, they ignored or they forgot friction. And what do you mean by friction? They didn't have a fully professional army. Many of the troops were drafted into the army of conscripts. They were in no shape to march 25 miles a day, 6 weeks in a row, day after day. They were collapsed by the roadside. They would slow down. They would need rest. The horses couldn't march 25 miles a day in 6 weeks, day after day. They couldn't pull the cannon. They couldn't pull the wagons. They too would collapse and they would die along the road. There'd be bottlenecks. When you have 500,000 or 1 million men marching, you're going to have bottlenecks. To make the long story short, they did not reach Paris in 6 weeks. France did have time to set up a defensive army along the Marne, the first battle of the Marne, and we ended up with trench warfare that lasted for 4 years and caused the lives of tens of millions of people. Friction happens in every business. And if you want to scale or you're thinking short term, you're not really aware or sensitive to when the frictions will come. And it's always going to come. There's always going to be a competitor or a new price tick or the market changes something that's going to upset your plan. And he says, do not make long-term plans without understanding that things are going to evolve. Be flexible and be aware And using my word, there'll be friction, and you've got to deal with that. So when you think short term and you don't think long term, you're not prepared for that. You just think, I'll do it, get in, get out. And then finally you find out nobody's interested in the product, or there's some competitor stepped in because you never researched it enough, and so on and so forth. So the thoughts that I want to leave you with for tonight is, number one, management is key, and you are the managers, you are the owners. Important thought, risk happens when you don't know. If you don't know, if you're not researching your own business and going beyond that, you're not capable of really truly managing the company the way you should. And the third one is, be aware of friction. It's going to happen, it's unavoidable, so make sure that in the back of your mind, in front of your mind, you always sense the idea is that things will evolve, things will change, and my competitor is not sitting there waiting. This we were doing, I looked in the paper to see how they're counting us, and they weren't, because they're a big ship and they didn't know what to do. We suddenly stepped into the market and we were pulling away all their customers until they almost went bankrupt. So it's going to happen. So make sure that you're focused on that idea and realize that there are eventualities that you have to be prepared for, options, solutions, things that you've accumulated that are in the storehouse of your mind or your notes, your books, whatever, that allows you to. So this is the way. Warren Buffett's game plan for success is really simple common sense mostly, good management, a moat. You've got to protect your business because otherwise you're just a commodity, and do it in an ethical fashion, have good judgment, be intelligent about your business, and if you're patient and you allow it to develop over a long time, you'll be around for a long time. Thank you.